You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Welcome back, Pithy listeners. And Erica, guess what I'm wearing?
Oh my gosh. Is it what I think it is?
I don't know. What do you think it is?
Did our shirts come in? He did. So good. Oh, I cannot wait to get mine.
I'm wearing my Circa Baby shirt. And I was walking through the gym earlier wearing it. And I felt like everybody was looking at me like, oh my God, where can I get one?
Oh my God.
I'm sure they were actually like, what does her shirt say? But for the moment, it felt great.
Circa baby, Nepo baby, we're just riding a trend here.
And we're talking about a Circa baby today.
Oh, yes, a Circa baby with so many names.
So many names. This is an episode that we actually premiered in our first season about Wu Zetian. We are re-releasing because this week is spring break. And I just haven't had a break.
You haven't had a break. And I don't know, you moved your family of 4 across the country. I feel like you're entitled to a break.
So we're taking a little break. We'll be back next week.
And I have a toddler, so that counts too.
I wanted to bring this episode back because I adore Wu Zetian. Not because of her actions. I do want to clarify that I don't support her multiple cases of infanticide. I don't want to support that aspect, but she is the one and only female ruler in her own right of China ever. And then her son undid it in 14 days, but that's not the point.
Why is it that sons who have queens as mothers, they're like, let's just piss all over this legacy? Paul did it right after Catherine the Great.
They did. They were all pissed off that a woman had power. So, without further ado,
the staggeringly remarkable and crazy and vindictive and violent and alluring, the Emperor Gaozong's one and only Wu Zetian.
All right, I'm ready. I'm confused. What is this woman's name? You called her Wu Mei and Wu Hao, and now you've introduced her as Wu Zetian. Can you please pick a lane and stay there?
Usually, I would completely agree with you, especially in an audio setting. Multiple names for the same person is confusing. But
Your favorite word?
But Chinese naming traditions are very important and reflect not just who the person is, but what they represent. So, while history knows our subject as Wu Zetian, that was her title as Empress regnant. But when she was the Empress consort of Emperor Gaozong, she was referred to as Wu Hao. And when she was the concubine of Emperor Taizong, she was called Wu Mei.
So just getting all of my ducks/woos in a row. What was her birth name?
No idea.
Great, of course.
Erica, as we discussed last week, female births often went unrecorded, and today's leading lady is no exception. The woman we are discussing today, the woman who would go on to be the one and only ruling empress of China ever, was born to the Wu clan, and that's the only birth name we can give her. But, slightly helpfully, women retain their surname even after marriage. So while the given name might change, her paternal surname remains constant, Wu. It appears in all of her titles, so you just have to follow the Wus.
So what do we know?
Well, we know that the Wu family owed their wealth to the Tang dynasty founder, who repaid their loyalty with money, grain, land, clothing, you name it. And thus, our future empress was born into a prestigious family. And more excitingly, her father broke the conventions of the time and encouraged her studies, including the quote-unquote masculine subjects of politics and government.
So masculine.
So masculine. I mean,
the testosterone. I'm just fanning myself.
You can smell it in the air. However, it was her remarkable beauty that sealed her fate. I know, the eye roll, I'm with you. At just 14, she was selected as an imperial concubine to Emperor Taizong. And while it was a great honor, her mother, cried bitterly.
Yeah, reasonable. She likely assumed she'd never see her daughter again, but also, she's 14. What business does she have being a concubine? She doesn't. She's 14.
She's 14. Yes. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I can't answer that question. But, of course, she and her mother knew that this would not be an easy life, as we shall soon see. But I actually think her mother was slightly heartened when legend claims she responded to her mother's tears, quote, "How do you know that it is not my fortune to meet the Son of Heaven?"
Telling. I guess all those political lessons were paying off in spades.
Yes, she knew from a very young age that the best way for a woman to have any power or influence was to be at court. And the only way to get to court was to be chosen in the medieval beauty pageant that was the concubine system.
At
14.
14. But at 14, she says to herself, I want influence and power, therefore, I'm going to do this. That's a lot of forward thought for an 8th grader. Obviously not the same, but 8th grade. Think about your 8th grader at home.
Yes. Her forethought, we will discuss it, and you can form your own opinions as to how much thought she gave things and how honest she was about her true feelings, or if it really was just all a ploy.
Okay.
And we'll get there.
Formulating.
But I am pretty sure that reality came crashing down on her when she learned that her position within the 5th of the 9 imperial ranks as concubine was really just a laundress.
That makes me as a mom feel better.
Exactly. Her responsibilities included changing the Son of Heaven's royal bedsheets. But she was clever, as I've said, and our concubine realized that access to his private chambers afforded her opportunity.
Great opportunity. Yeah, Caroline, This was supposed to be a clean episode, and while I know she is a laundress, you do have a history.
All right, that's fair. I do like the spicier side of things. But suffice to say that while she is believed to have consummated the relationship with the Emperor Taizong, she was not highly favored for her nighttime activities. Instead, Emperor Taizong is said to have found her bright, brazen, and brave. Erica, would you read the following legend of how concubine Wu wooed the emperor?
Okay, now that is an alliteration I can get behind.
Excellent.
From her own account, quote, Emperor Taizong had a horse with the name Lion Stallion, and it was so large that no one could get on its back. I was a lady in waiting attending Emperor Taizong, and I suggested to him, I only need 3 things to subordinate it. An iron whip, an iron hammer, and a sharp dagger. I will whip it with the iron whip. If it does not submit, I will hammer it in the head with an iron hammer. God, okay. If it still does not submit, I will cut its throat with the dagger. Emperor Taizong praised my bravery. Do you really believe that you were qualified to dirty my dagger? He retorted.
A very playful response from our Emperor Taizong. And a slightly scary example of her, confidence?
That's one word for it, but what was her response?
I don't know. I don't have the response.
No response.
I have no response for you. I'm so sorry.
No response, Wu. What is this?
I'm sure she had one. I'm sure it was witty. Just imagine.
I'm sure it was pithy.
And there is plenty more where all of this comes from, so just buckle up.
Give me more medieval sass.
It is at this point that I can finally give you a name for our leading lady.
It's not Wu Zetian?
No, we're not even close yet. Obviously, we don't get to give her a name, but Emperor Taizong did, and he bestowed her with the art name.
Of course he did.
Of Wu Mai.
Art name?
Yes, and I do apologize in advance for simplifying this, but to keep from being bogged down in non-essentials, think of it like a professional name. So in this case, she was Wu Mei, meaning glamorous, kind of like glamorous spice.
Oh, I'd take that over posh any day.
I'm partial to a ginger spice myself, but I did spend most of my life as a redhead, so... Glamorous or not, she was certainly not his favorite concubine. And that left her with some free time. And that led her to make some dangerous decisions.
So scary spice.
Oh, yeah. In the end, that will be the appropriate moniker, if not, frankly, too weak of a term for her. But we're not there yet.
Dun, dun, dun!
Exactly. Suffice to say that this 14-year-old girl was not exactly enamored by the middle-aged emperor, no matter how divine. Instead, she was quite intrigued by his youngest son with the Empress, 4 years younger than herself, in fact, named Li Ji. And the feeling was mutual.
To become one.
Indeed they did. And while there are a few historian holdouts, most agree that their affair likely started during Taizong's reign, which, in terms of an ickiness factor, is pretty high up there.
But it's no hunkle, husband, uncle, for those who are just joining us.
No, it was not the fate of poor Joanna the Sad. But, luckily for the young couple, dear old Emperor Dad died in 649, and somehow, out of 14 sons, the crown passed to 21-year-old Li Ji, and he was not exactly a prime candidate. Inexperienced and sickly.
Not an auspicious combo.
No. He was only named heir because his 2 elder brothers were banished in disgrace. And as we've learned, primogeniture can lead to some truly terrible leadership. But while Li Ji, now known as Emperor Gaozong, had the good fortune to win the title, Wu Mei did not. As a childless concubine, she was sent to Ganye Temple along with her fellow baron consorts. Custom dictated that upon the death of their emperor, his women without children were to become Buddhist nuns, spending the rest of their lives under the strict restrictions of monastic life in an effort to erase all memory of their sinful vanities while at court. Their heads were shaved, their clothes removed, and their souls laid bare. They were forbidden to speak with one another, could not correspond with friends or family, and relied upon future emperors' largesse for their daily rations. And all too frequently, it was not enough.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not enough. This is worse than the Venetian nuns. Much worse.
I can't disagree.
Significantly worse. Significantly worse.
And remember, many of these women were young. They'd won this medieval beauty pageant, and they had their entire lives ahead of them, and were now resigned to a half-starved existence of cold stone floors and rough, raw rags.
No, thank you. No, none for me. I pass.
I imagine that Wu Mei felt the same. But... her knight in shining armor / her sickly lover-turned-emperor could not live without her.
I will admit, I was imagining someone a bit more dashing.
Yes, reality can be oh so disappointing.
He's no Reggae Sean Page.
Historians again debate how she returned to court. All of them agree that Emperor Gaozong went to Ganye Temple under pretense of prayer, but with the intention of bringing his beloved home. Tradition be damned. Which, I'm going to say now, is pretty much the boldest thing he does in his entire reign. So, he gave it all in one go. This was it. Most sources agree that upon seeing each other, they both wept with joy and sadness, and many claim that his Empress Wang, saw this display and became incredibly jealous.
Shock of all shocks.
Shocking. Another faction claims that it was, in fact, Empress Wang's idea to bring her out of retirement. While the Empress might hold the supreme title, she did not hold the Emperor's heart. He was besotted by the lovely consort Xiao, with whom he already had 2 sons and a daughter, while Empress Wang remained childless. In hopes of luring Emperor Gaozong away from her known rival, consort Xiao, Empress Wang encouraged the emperor to bring back his first love, Wu Mei.
Oh my, this is much better than the Real Housewives. The intrigue is really just chef's kiss.
On point.
Chef's kiss.
The real consorts of Imperial China. I can only imagine that they were just as melodramatic.
That's why we love them.
No matter why Wu Mei was recalled, she was. And while the court was horrified, after all, she had belonged to the emperor's father, they eventually just got over it.
Bring me my smelling salts, please. Woo!
But Empress Wang did not. If this really was her idea, it backfired spectacularly. If it wasn't, then at least she didn't have to feel completely responsible for her own downfall. Once back at court, Consort Wu easily became the favorite. And of course, the rumor mill was primed and ready. All sorts of tales trailed her wherever she went, the most egregious of which claimed that she was only recalled to satisfy the emperor's obscene sexual delights that no one else within his concubinal system were willing to entertain.
Well, that's dirty. And isn't it a predetermined fact that she is not particularly prized for her bedroom delights?
Well, not by his father, but maybe she was willing to do other... You know what? I don't know. Okay. While this sexual delight situation is likely not the case, it is clear that the pair got right to it. Consort Wu gave birth to a son named Li Hong right away in 652, followed by another son in 653 named Li Xion.
Busy.
And during these first few years of connubial bliss, Consort Wu struggled with her place at court. The real consorts of imperial China were unhappy. Once Empress Wang discovered Emperor Gaozong's overwhelming, not only desire, but true love for Consort Wu, she resorted to sabotage and in fact actually teamed up with her former enemy, Consort Xiao.
I love a team up.
Oh, just wait. You really don't want to be part of this one. The two has-beens decide to plot against the new favorite, but fail to dampen the emperor's ardor. Instead, by 654, Consort Wu is firmly entrenched as his favorite and his political confidant, and she's pregnant again.
3 kids in 3 years? Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
Could not be me, no. But I am sure that her many attendants and nannies and cooks and wet nurses helped her out. But yeah, still no. This time, Consort Wu gives birth to a daughter. However, soon after the birth, the newborn was found dead, showing signs of strangulation.
Are you...
Take your time.
You have got?
Nope. This happened. Yeah, but just wait. It gets weird. No.
What do you mean?
It gets worse.
It gets weird? It gets worse.
And it gets a little weird.
I'd almost rather it just be weird than worse. Like, what's worse?
Just wait.
I don't want to know, but I'm gonna find out.
Consort Wu knows who is responsible. She instantly accuses Empress Wang of murdering her baby girl. According to witnesses, she was seen near the child's room, and the emperor is easily convinced that his childless empress murdered his little girl out of jealousy, and Empress Wang is unable to provide an alibi.
Oh, this is too simple and too easy, and you said worse.
I did. The question is, did she do it? Let's break it down, shall we? There's obviously no way to know for sure, but there are 3 likely scenarios. Number 1, perhaps the jealous Empress Wang did in fact kill the child. Number 2, maybe the little girl died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The palace had absolutely dreadful ventilation, and with coal heating, many historians have suggested that it's possible it was simply a tragic accident. Or there's the most commonly believed choice. Number 3, Consort Wu, power-hungry and searching for a way to destroy the Empress and make way for her own ascension to power, murdered her own daughter and then cunningly implicated Empress Wang.
Yeah. Oh, you said worse. Are you...
Remember, if the horse doesn't bend, she'll just slit its throat.
Haunting.
Just wait.
It's a girl, so... She's disposable.
Yeah, she didn't do it to one of the boys. Yeah, well, actually, it's coming.
We'll see.
Just wait. So, no matter the truth, the emperor believed his beloved Lady Wu and was easily persuaded by his confident and forceful consort to depose the empress. I will spare you the palace rigmarole. Suffice to say, Emperor Gaozong is very indecisive and pretty weak, so it took a while for him to act in a way that Consort Wu desired. But eventually, both the Empress Wu and Consort Xiao, who was somehow later implicated as an accomplice, were placed under house arrest.
2 birds, 1 stone?
Oh no, the stone is yet to come. After being locked in a building with no windows and no doors, just a small hole through which food was delivered, the emperor decided perhaps they'd served their time.
And Consort Wu definitely did not feel that way.
Bingo. Yeah, she was pretty pissed. And if they had murdered her child, then reasonably so. She was
But also if not.
She was concerned that her irresolute husband would release them, which would not do. She decided to act. She had both women caned 100 times, their hands and feet cut off, and their mutilated bodies placed into large wine barrels, supposedly proclaiming, "Let these two witches be drunk to their bones."
Oh my. It is not often that I am speechless.
It's intense. Upon hearing her fate, the Empress is said to have acted with dignity, which I could not do.
Yeah, me too.
The consort Xiao did not, and therefore is much more on my level of thinking. Legend claims she screamed out, "Wu is a treacherous monster. I will be reincarnated as a cat, and she will be reincarnated as a mouse so that I can grab her throat forever and ever."
I do love the imaginative flair, but I feel like there must be, like, some extra venom lost in the translation.
I think so. It is certainly not what I would come up with on the spot while facing an unbearably painful death, but I am no imperial consort, so hey.
Don't sell yourself short.
Oh, I'm not. I don't want to be one. This sounds terrible.
Obviously, if it leads me to be put in...
Wait, it took several days for these women to die inside the wine barrels. Handless, footless. And caned.
How did they not just drown?
I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. As usual, we are looking at these bloody, gruesome deaths with way too many questions.
Yeah.
For what the historians have on offer. But once mercifully dead, Consort Wu, though she won't remain a consort for long, had their bodies removed and beheaded. But she was evidently a bit nervous about Consort Xiao's curse. She forbade the palace and its personnel from keeping cats as pets, and eventually she just outright banned cats in the entire capital. No cats, so that they couldn't catch her as a mouse. She also had terrible nightmares, to the point that she encouraged, which really just means she told, the emperor to designate a second new capital in the eastern part of China, in Luoyang. And then she moved there, never wishing to live in the city where her enemies lay buried again.
If I were the falsely accused Consort Xiao, I'd haunt the crap out of her. I would be there every waking moment. I would stand really close to her face and just whisper until she woke up and then just stare. I would be a great ghost. I'd be a great ghost.
And you know what? You/Consort Xiao will not be alone in these ghostly endeavors. There are plenty of victims yet to come.
Tell me everything. How many sides do we have today?
2, actually. You're so welcome. I came prepared for you. She started with the offspring of the murdered ladies. The soon-to-be Empress Wu put Consort Xiao's daughters, who were, remember, princesses, her husband's children, under house arrest inside the palace and refused to allow them to marry for 17 years. Only when her son actually intervened later on were they allowed to wed, but they were handed over to 2 lowly imperial guards.
Like, were they even, like, right when they came out of that?
17 years? No.
I can't...
No.
I mean, I'm a great conversationalist and excellent company.
Obviously.
But even I would get tired of myself after 17 years.
Well, they had each other. There were 2 of them. And the son was not placed under house arrest, but he honestly did little better. He was permitted to live, but she continually trolled him with treacherous accusations and demotions. And when she became empress of her own dynasty, which, we will get there, she had him killed. It was 40 years later, but damn, could this woman hold a grudge.
Like super glued.
Do not piss off Empress Wu. And empress she now was. Within a year, she officially wed Emperor Gaozong and became empress. More than that, she became his partner in all things. Actually, no, not partner. She was the dominant personality and driving force of the entire empire. One historian described him as putty in her hands.
I'm sure she at one point loved him. I'm sure, right? But here's the other thing. How difficult and terrible must it be to be married to your intellectual inferior? No, not for power, not for anything in the world could I yoke myself to someone incompetent. Couldn't be me.
I can't disagree. I frankly wonder if it was all a plot from the beginning. Many traditional Chinese sources claim her motivations might have been less than loving from the get-go. But it's highly contested. There's really no way to know. It also easily be inspired by her gender. After all, female rulers, especially at this early time in the medieval history, were always viewed with suspicion. So we can't really say.
Why aren't they simpering and fanning themselves? Oh, their little women brains can't do it. Why are they more than wounds?
Yeah. So no matter the reason, she was now firmly entrenched in power. A year after her ascension, she convinced her allies at court to petition the emperor to remove his first son from the line of succession and instead name her firstborn, Li Hong, as heir presumptive.
Clever, have someone else suggested. It seems a little less self-serving, but only
a little less.
Only a smidgen.
Only a smidgen. Yeah, this lady was very clever. She was a political mastermind. Like pawns on a chessboard, she used her advisors and chancellors, moving them to and fro for her very own purposes. And unlike her weak husband, she dispensed punishment quickly and effectively. Exiles and executions soon let the court know who was in charge. She even started to posthumously strip former honored members of the court of their titles. Little salt in that wound.
Don't get me wrong. Effective punishment, very important in ruling an empire in my obviously prolific experience. But the posthumous stripping of titles,
unnecessary.
That just seems a little petty.
It was petty. Yep. She was present for every imperial meeting, sitting behind a very obvious pearl screen and wearing yellow like the emperor, which was completely unprecedented. She held court over the court.
The pearl screen?
The pearl screen! I did include that because I was like, oh, fancy.
Where can I get one?
You have a better chance of finding one in Japan than I do in San Diego.
Accurate.
When the emperor struggled with difficult decisions, he just asked one of his chancellors to pop behind the screen and consult the Empress. So, really no hiding this. From the Song Dynasty historian, quote, "The great power of the empire all devolved on the Empress. Promotion or demotion, life or death were settled by her word. The emperor sat with folded arms."
I want to love her daring and her drive. After all, when does anyone ever hear of a woman with so much power in the 7th century? But that darn murderous escapade with the daughter and the wine barrels, it makes it difficult to praise her and to be on her side.
The wine barrels.
I want to be on your side, Woo. I want to be on your side. But you're making it difficult. I can't get behind that.
No, I found myself throughout this episode oscillating between love and sympathy and hate, compassion, and embarrassment almost. So Lady Wu is an enigma, and she was oh so cunning. Knowing that the people were, at best, ambivalent to their tacit emperor, she proposed that he embark upon a ceremonial sacrifice to heaven and earth at Mount Tai, a theatrical ceremony that had only been completed once or twice before due to its expense and its physical difficulty. It was also really only meant for emperors who had accomplished staggeringly impressive deeds, which our meek little Gaozong had not. But she insisted. And not just the emperor, but the empress as well, would climb the mountain to give sacrifices and cloak themselves in symbolic power.
Sneaky.
I rather envision her as a fox here. Small, beautiful, clever. But that's not to say that she didn't have any positive effects on the government. While she was nepotistic and, I hate to say it, power hungry, she was also astute. It was she who proposed the establishment of a palace exam to find intelligent, talented people from the lower classes and employ them as government officials.
I can see that. While her family had money, it wasn't exactly the top of the food chain. It does make sense that she would believe in some social mobility here.
Social mobility and loyalty.
Key.
Building people up from nothing means that she had a host of officials who were loyal to her. It also lets her get rid of idiot nobles who were completely useless, or, actually even better, cunning nobles who wanted to destroy her.
I can do more with idiots as long as they're compliant than people with actual brains.
What are you doing with these? Never mind. And of course, it was also just really good for the government and helped it run more smoothly. She ruled alongside her husband for 28 years, and there were a few times that he started to question her power.
Ooh.
One in particular was when she was accused of using witchcraft, which was obviously spurred by jealous advisors.
Obviously.
However, she had spent a large amount of time cultivating an entire palace full of spies. She knew everything that happened in the palace, in the capital, in the empire. She was oh so well connected. Truly masterful. And so she arrives just as her husband holds the edict to depose her, throws herself at his feet, and reminds him of their eternal love.
Oh God, I know where this is going.
He looks from her to them, back to her, before deciding to arrest her accusers instead.
Shock and awe, surprise, never been done before. What?
And damn, did they suffer.
Oh, not more wine barrels.
No wine barrels. The arrested advisors were accused of plotting treason and were executed, but I do not think it was quite as
gruesome,
grotesque. However, their sons were also executed, and their grandchildren imprisoned. 3 generations were forced to pay for the sins of one.
I really want to like her.
But wait. There's more.
More?
She is also accused by historians of murdering her own sister, Lady Han, when the Emperor's wandering eye turned her way.
That was absolutely stupid, Lady Han. What are you doing?
Agreed.
What are you doing?
As I tell my children on the regs, don't poke the bear. And when her sister was dead, the Emperor then turned his attentions to the sister's daughter, Empress Wu's niece, supposedly wishing to make her a concubine.
Can he not keep it in his britches? He's as indecisive in love, quote.
Literally pick any other woman.
More indecisive in love than he is in politics, and my God, if that's not saying something.
It's saying something. And you know what? Somehow this young beauty was poisoned.
Oh my God, how? I can't think of anything.
Shocking. Yes.
Huh.
The Empress was also shocked, or so she claimed. Somehow, poison was found in the hands of her much disliked cousin, and she pointed her deadly finger and bye-bye.
You really can't make this stuff up. Reality is stranger than fiction. The woman has no limits. How did no one, especially her own family, not question this in some way?
One man did. The Duke of Zhao.
And he died.
Hold on. I mean, yes. Hold on, we'll get there. The Duke of Zhao, her nephew, son, and brother to the deceased. He suspected that his aunt, Empress Wu, was in fact responsible, though he actually had quite a few private skeletons in his own closet, including the fact that he was sleeping with his own grandmother, Empress Wu's mom. But that is a rabbit hole that we do not have time for today.
Oh my God, that's a huge mic drop. You can't just walk away from hot goss like that.
And yet, Empress Wu...
Is this the small bite? Is this the small bite?
I don't think so. That's all I have for you. They were sleeping together. You know, if I find weird incest, I put it in. I cannot help it. I do think it's entertaining. I'm sorry to the generations that came out with 6 years or something. Empress Wu was wary of her nephew because of his concerns about her involvement in both of his family members' deaths. So she preemptively accused him of raping a young girl, a princess, in fact, who was actually intended for her own first son, Li Hong.
Dang.
And so to exile he goes, where he was either murdered or ordered to commit suicide.
Potato, potato.
Tomato, tomato. And it just gets worse.
The puns or the story?
The story.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the puns as well, but that was harsh, and I'm gonna maybe take that out because that hurt my feelings. No. So she's pretty much killed everyone within a 5-mile radius, but there's more.
How? How is there more?
Easily.
Aren't they all dead?
Not yet. She's got a few left. 20 years into her joint rule with her, by now, ailing husband, and he was almost completely out of the picture at this point, really just a name.
Well, thank God.
Yeah.
A mercy.
Her eldest son began to complain that she had too much power. He was 23 years old and felt it was time for her to back off and let him act as regent for the bedridden father. And then, somehow, he died.
Fratricide again? I am astounded by how often we come across murderous parents in this podcast. Like, is it us? Is it us?
So her second son, Li Xian, became the crown prince, but he soon lost his luster as well.
Seriously, how stupid do you have to be to go up against her at this point? You smile and say, yes, Mom, until she does.
So he'd heard a rumor that he wasn't actually Empress Wu's son, but rather that of her sister, the murdered Lady Han.
Okay, where did that come from?
I have no idea. And I don't think Empress Wu knew or cared, but she was pissed. She rebuked him for listening to such hot goss, and then had her staff write 2 books entitled Good Examples for the Crown Prince and Biographies of Filial Sons, both of which she presented to him.
A very good Christmas gift.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Have these books be better.
Be better.
But when her favorite sorcerer was assassinated, Wu suspected Li Xian was behind it. Likely because the seer had a vision wherein Li Xian was unsuitable to inherit the throne. She was also unhappy about his penchant for women, lots of them, and men, also lots of them. She accused him of treason and the assassination of her favorite sorcerer and sent him to exile under house arrest.
What? No murder?
No, believe it or not. No, she was concerned she might run out of sons, so she had to be careful.
Fair.
So her third son, Li Xian, and I apologize, but my understanding of Mandarin is too poor to accurately differentiate here. Both her second and her third son's names are spelled the same way in English, but they do have different Chinese characters. So her third son's name, to me, also looks like Li Xian, but he was now the crown prince, and then, perhaps just to help us out millennia later, he then changed his name to Li Ji. So, third son.
Thank you, Li Ji.
Third son, Li Ji. He's ready to take over when dear Papa dies, which, in 683, the sickly Emperor Gaozong does. But, contrary to the firmly established tradition, no one but Empress Wu was present at his death. No one could see him, not even his children. It was unheard of for a Chinese emperor to die unobserved with no one to attest to his last words.
I'm shocked. What?
Mm-hmm.
Can't imagine what might have happened.
You and the rest of China. It seemed very plausible that she might have helped him go gentle into that good night. The third son was ordered to Luoyang, the eastern capital, where she chose to reside due to the ghosts of the western capital, and then told to shut up, sit down, and get out of her way. But again, her sons continued to underestimate her, or actually in this case, the son's wife. The new Empress refused to accept her role as puppet, and, rather like her predecessor, Lady Wu endeavored to use her weak, emasculated, incompetent husband as a pawn.
Like father, like son.
The new Empress convinced her husband / the puppet emperor to appoint her father as the prime minister, along with a flurry of other honors.
More nepotism.
It's the dynastic way. But Empress Regent Wu was having none of it. After just 6 weeks, she deposed her third son and replaced him with number 4.
Okay, so she's going through these youngins like hotcakes.
Yeah, but this is her last option, so he'd better be good. Li Dan, son number 4, became Emperor Rizong.
And thank goodness she had so many sons with which to play musical chairs.
And finally, Empress Regent Wu had learned her lesson. No more Mrs. Nice Guy. And yes, I'm saying that she was nice to the last one. She doesn't even bother with pretense anymore. She is the power, so she sits on the throne. No more screens, no more puppets. Her son, the actual emperor, was moved into his imperial quarters and never again appeared at any imperial functions. From the day he ascended the throne, he was under effective house arrest, and he met with no officials. He existed on paper only.
After hearing how she treated the rest of her offspring, I'm beginning to lean towards the whole murder her own daughter, blame the Empress Wang, and steal her crown scheme.
Yeah, you can see why it is the prevailing theory.
Yeah.
At some point in her Emperor Rizong regency, she offered to return the imperial authority to her son/puppet emperor, but he wisely, very wisely, declined.
Finally, one of her children realizes it is just best to sit down and shut up.
Either that or off with his head.
Mm-hmm.
And drunk with power, yet still wary of this unnecessary regent position, she installed copper mailboxes outside every government building, encouraging all officials from the bottom to the top to report on each other.
And draped in the dangerous cloak of anonymity, I'm sure that this led to some vicious backstabbing.
Mm-hmm. And with the rise of false accusations came more tortures and more executions. At this point, even thinking something negative brought risk of retaliation. She had complete control. And that, she felt, was the perfect time to finally end this whole facade and proclaim herself Empress Regnant. She proclaimed the end of the Tang dynasty and the beginning of the Zhao dynasty, ruled by the Wu clan and founded by herself, now known as Wu Zetian.
And all of this, I assume, was completely against tradition and the laws of succession.
Oh yeah, this was technically a coup, though it was met with no resistance, since she was both the overthrower and the overthrown.
Clever.
Foxy. She used her secret society of spies and her personal enforcers to crush any opposition, and told her son, Emperor Rizong, to officially yield his throne to her. But while her takeover was illegal and frankly unnecessary, because she already had the power, she made the most of it. Her imperial examination system and its ability to find talented people to run the government helped stabilize her regime. While it meant chaos for her personal life and those of her family and their surrounding factions, for China, her rule meant economic security, an efficient and streamlined government, and a relatively peaceful time with just a few border skirmishes.
Yeah, but her personal life, let's get back to that.
That is the good stuff, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a few events of note. First off, she became very interested in mysticism and sought the advice of an old Buddhist nun claiming to predict the future, as well as a non-Han or a non-Chinese man who claimed to be 500 years old.
Okay, Methuselah.
But when these two failed to predict a fire that destroyed much of her palace, she turned them into slaves.
To her credit, that's the kind of thing a seer should let their sponsor know about.
I can't disagree with that. Should a fire come my way, I'd want my mystic to tell me.
Yep.
She also had a series of lovers and romantic triangles.
Excellent, do go on.
Well, the devastating fire was actually caused by her own lover, who was himself a Buddhist monk.
Seems appropriate.
He turned arsonist in a fit of jealousy. He was quite upset that she had taken yet another lover, the imperial physician.
Oh dear.
Well, needless to say, the monk/lover was executed.
Naturally.
And then she got herself two new lovers, the Zhang brothers.
You go, girl.
Okay, fine, that's fair.
Because, what is she? She's in her, 60s?
She's 66 when she becomes Empress Regnant, so she's almost 70 at this point. And these brothers were young and handsome and had absolutely no notable lineage, but she soon fixed that. She made them dukes. Cougar.
Good for her.
So like Catherine the Great, the histories make much of her sexual appetites, including her preference for younger men.
Because heaven forbid a woman over 50 still like it.
Exactly. So here is a great quote from one of her leading biographers, Mary Anderson. Erica, would you do the honors?
Empress Wu had a, quote, string of virile lovers, such as one lusty, big-limbed lout of a peddler, whom she allowed to frequent her private apartments, In her 70s, Wu showered special favor on two smooth-cheeked brothers, the Zhang brothers, former boy singers. One of the brothers, she declared, had a face as beautiful as a lotus flower. Wow, okay. While it said that she valued the other for his talents in the bedchamber, unquote. You know what? She's earned it. She's ruling this country all by herself. She's had to murder her own children due to their incompetence. Her husband is gone, probably murdered. She deserves a little me time.
Brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle. That's a nice plug for Bubbles and Bites. I like that.
Why, thank you.
Yeah, but at some point, she did realize that she wouldn't live forever, I think.
What?
Maybe she was using the mystics for that, I don't know. And therefore, she had to do something about this line of succession. Son number 4, previously known as Li Dan, then Emperor Rizong, and then post-coup back to Li Dan, decided that he'd really had enough of all this nonsense and encouraged his mother to recall his elder brother, number 3 brother, Li Ji, back from exile, and to proclaim him as the crown prince. And then, to complicate matters further, Li Ji changed his name back to Li Xian, which, if you recall, sounds incredibly similar, but has different Chinese characters to his brother, also Li Xian, before adjusting it for the 6th time to Wu Xian, because Wu needed to be prominent for him to one day continue the Wu clan's creation of the Zhao dynasty. Whew!
Wow.
I hope you can follow that. But despite his
That's a lot.
numerous names, Empress Wu wasn't convinced her children and son-in-laws would follow her explicit orders upon death. So she made them all swear an oath to each other to support and honor the Wu clan and its Zhao dynasty.
Guess she's never heard of crossing one's fingers behind one's back.
No, she missed that memo. And as she got a bit older, she started to miss other things as well. She relied more and more in her 70s upon her advisors, and it became obvious enough that her grandchildren, her grandson, her granddaughter, and her grandson-in-law were overheard discussing her failing mental state and reliance upon her ministers.
Yeah, I bet that went over super well.
Yep, she ordered them to commit suicide. The grandchildren, not the advisors.
Another side, killing one's grandchildren.
So I did look this up because I knew we'd want to know, but I can only find parricide, which includes all close family members. I do think that we have finally found a familial murder that doesn't have its own vocab word. However,
I'm a little disappointed.
if someone knows better than I, please do let us know.
Yeah, I can't believe we've already run out of sides.
Don't worry, I'll grab you some chips or a salad after this.
So funny.
Anywho, or anywoo, by the winter of 704, Empress Wu was seriously ill.
Well, she's 80 at this point, living in the 7th century AD. It's incredible all by itself. I'm sure she is sick.
Yeah,
Sick of living.
She was too stubborn to die. But as we all know, no one lives forever. While ailing, she forbade her children and counselors from attending her. The only people permitted to see her, the young and handsome Zhang brothers. Her kids were obviously not thrilled.
Yeah, I bet they were concerned she'd cut them out entirely and hand the crown over to her menage something partners.
Probably. And the chancellors were concerned as well. So together, they plotted. The children, the generals, the chancellors, even the crown prince all agreed that these brothers had to go. They were promptly disposed of, and then she was informed they'd been executed for treason.
I cannot imagine that went over well.
It did not. But at this point, she was too physically weak to do much about it. Even her royal chancellors had plotted against her. Everyone saw the writing on the wall. She was forced to yield her throne to Wu Xian and was removed to a smaller palace. And then, just 2 weeks later...
She died.
No, actually. Sadly, she lived to see her son and heir, Wu Xian, abolish the Zhao dynasty just 2 weeks after overthrowing her. He restored the Tang dynasty, going down in history as Li Xian, removing the Wu. And then, because he needed a 9th name change, 9, he took the title Emperor Zhongzong.
No one needs that many names. Pick a name. Stick with it. Settle in. Get comfy. Make it fit. Holy cow, these people!
Empress Wu died nearly a year later in December of 705 AD. She was interred with her husband, Emperor Gaozong, and her other children, some, if not all of whom, she personally murdered.
Now that is a ghost story waiting to happen. Murderous mother buried with her victims/children. That would certainly haunt my eternal slumber, but you don't see her making a third capital.
No third capital, because she's dead. Before we completely say goodbye to Concubine Wu Mai, Lady Wu Hao, Empress Consort Wu, and finally Empress Regnant Wu Zetian, let's just recap her greatest accomplishments. Erica?
China's one and only empress is seriously the goat. While her children may not have enjoyed her overbearing and murderous nature and resolve, the people of China generally did. Her rule was incredibly popular. She enacted the, quote, arts of grace, which helped the lower classes through various acts of relief. She widened the spectrum of government service members to include gentry and commoners, all in search of the best and brightest. She gave generous promotions and increased pay in the lower ranks. Her reign also saw major expansions of the Chinese Empire, going deep into Central Asia, and she conducted a series of wars on the Korean Peninsula. But most importantly, she actually did the job. Unlike many, and perhaps even most, of her male counterparts, she went to work every day. She attended meetings, made difficult decisions, unlike her husband, acted in the best interest of her people, and never took her foot off the gas. She was China until the very bitter end.
Absolutely. But historically, she is not always seen in the best light.
To be fair, she was a prolific murderess.
True. But that was really part and parcel of daily life in government administration at the time. She needs to be judged through a contemporary lens.
Does she? I mean,
I think so.
Murder hand in glove with politics in a contemporary lens? Come on now, Caroline.
Okay, I'm just saying that the emperors of old had to be brutal to make sure that their reign was not questioned. Look what happens, Emperor Gaozong, when you don't control things. You lose your power, literally, even to your own spouse. The biggest issue for historians is the lack of sources. We basically just have the official dynastic histories, and those imperial history books are written with the intention of schooling future rulers in lessons of leadership. For example, don't get usurped, and thus presenting an usurper, such as Empress Wu Zetian, in a flattering light is highly counterproductive. Similarly, while she promoted Buddhism, Confucianism was still the mainstream. And as we discussed in our episode on the Hainyo, women were meant to be subservient to men. Hard to do whilst Empress Regnant, or even frankly, Empress Regent.
I can see that. Looks to me as if it's a question of whether her skills at leadership and her concern for the overall empire outweigh her treacherous and convoluted personal life.
But then again, isn't that just highlighting the double standard we place on female rulers?
Is it? Because
would we be
Ivan
as judgmental?
is pretty awful.
Well, that's true. Ivan had an entire city in which to murder people.
Would we, you and I, be this judgmental of men? Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
All right, we are pretty judgmental. Okay,
we are. I feel like we are pretty...
We tell it as it is.
When it comes to gender, we do call out the stereotypes, but when someone's an awful, murderous, treacherous person, we say, you're an awful, murderous, treacherous person.
Erica, what was she fighting for?
For me, this is one of the most simple ones. As complicated as Wu Zetian is and how complicated her story is, I think her motivations are some of the most simple. The retention of power.
Yes, I agree with that. Once she became empress, or even once she was back with Emperor Gaozong. But before...
I don't know that her initial aims were to be Empress. But it's very clear after that whole incident with the horse and her saying, I'd whip it into submission, I'd do this into the submission.
With the hammer
Yeah. It was very clear that she wanted to rise. I don't think she had a goal at that point.
Okay.
I think she just wanted more. And once she got there, the power retention began. It's not like her first marriage or sexual encounter.
I don't think she could have possibly felt the first marriage was going to get her to Empress.
And also, I don't know that it was especially compatible. I don't even know that it was particularly consensual, if I'm honest.
Well, if you believe the folklore of her mother telling her that she has been chosen to be one of the consorts, she is thrilled at the opportunity. And her mother is incredibly sad because her mother knows this is likely the end of their relationship. Although it's not, which is interesting because she rises to power and brings her family into the fold eventually. But she, Wu Zetian, or Wu Mai, or whatever her original name was, because we don't know what her name was at this point. We don't have a name for her beyond Wu, which is her paternal name, up until the emperor bestows one upon her.
That's right.
Which is horrifying.
God.
But Wu, at that point, responds positively and is really excited about the opportunity. So if we look at it,
she's also super young at that
14.
point. She's
14.
She has no idea what sex is, and heaven forbid she even be thinking about what is sex in this, like...
I don't think she was thinking about it as sex or a sexual relationship or a marriage in what we would think of today, or even him. I think she wanted to be near the power from the beginning. And her father had taught her politics. Her father had broken with tradition and had given her a really good education. I think she saw this as an opportunity to become something more than a womb.
I do think there is a certain romanticism about being in a palace, being, like you said, near power. I think that she
My
was very
daughter
much
wants to be a
entranced.
princess.
And I can guarantee you she's not thinking about that in any kind of
No,
marriage
she is
sense.
not.
She just
In
wants
fact,
to
she
be
told
a
me the
princess.
definition of princess. Would you like to know what it is?
Tell me.
It is a girl who wears dresses and has a crown.
Oh, so me.
Yeah!
Dad.
Done!
Yeah,
Done! You are my princess.
exactly.
It is just a romanticized thing, and I think even in 8th century China, it was still romanticized to be brought to the palace to live this luxurious life.
Even if she had the education and was that mid-range wealthy, there's still a very big difference between lower nobility and the emperor.
There's a big difference between anybody and the Son of Heaven living in his forbidden city.
It's also called the Forbidden City, for God's sake.
I mean, that's cool. So here's my question. Do you think that it was just power all the time, or at some point did she realize that if she took her foot off the gas, she'd be murdered? When do you think it became a fight for her life?
It's always been power retention, because without power, she would have that. Now, when that changed, perhaps once she came back from her exile, I think that is when she realized, A, her potential, but then made that realization, if I'm going to be at the top, I have to be the ultimate predator, seriously, so that I can protect myself.
Yeah, she's an interesting character. I am intrigued. What would her life have been like if she didn't get brought back? Do you think she would have climbed for power within the Buddhist monastery? Do you think she would have tried to become prioress or whatever the equivalent is?
Oof.
Or was it her circumstances that brought out this power hungry to the
People like
murderous
her,
extent?
and when I say people like her, I mean people who are willing to kill their own kid to frame someone else. They are going to fight and claw and manipulate for the purpose of rising through the ranks, and it doesn't matter what it is. So yes, I think she would have done absolutely whatever she had in her power to be as powerful as she could be, or as influential.
Yeah. Do you think she started sleeping with the first emperor's son on purpose to hopefully remain? Do you think she was calculating enough to be like, okay, this guy's old and he's going to die soon, and then I'm going to go to a monastery?
Oof, that's a good one.
It's an idea, although it is so taboo to sleep with your husband's son. So I wonder if she felt like that was something that could be overcome. Because he did come get her, but there was a big chance he wouldn't.
I mean, there's a big chance he wouldn't, but when you're good, you're good. Joking aside, though, I don't know. That's such a good question.
I know we're not supposed to give her agency in that way. And we've talked a lot about that this season with making sure that we stick to the sources and that we don't just fly by the seat of our pants with supposition. But I think it's an interesting question.
No. This is the supposition part of the episode. We've already given you the facts.
Sure.
You know?
This is history a la Erica and Caroline. And therefore, way juicier.
It's our name on the LLC paperwork, so... But no, I'm trying to put myself in that kind of a situation. I think she saw an opportunity and said, I can either sit on my hands or I can shoot my shot. And it worked out for her.
I think she saw that he was infatuated. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, sure, let's test this and see what I can get.
What's the worst that could happen? She stays in her Buddhist monastery? They kill her?
That's true. She had really high stakes at that point to be sleeping with someone other than her husband, but also her life had no life expectancy. I mean, she wasn't sleeping with her husband. Mm-hmm. He wasn't choosing to bed her. She wasn't going to become pregnant, and she knew he's old. When he goes, I go.
She has nothing to lose.
I do appreciate and understand this power-hungry mentality. I think she was fighting for power. But she ruled China better than any of those men around her, with a few exceptions of how she handled, close relationships within the palace.
Killing people?
But outside of killing the people surrounding her, she did great things for China.
You mean like aside from eating the rich and giving to the poor?
Well, yeah. Aside from that. The amount of feminine rage this woman must have had to know that she is so much more superior to everyone else around, not only intellectually, but she's so ruthless in what she will do to achieve her goal. No wonder she was so pissed and didn't mind killing people in the palace. What were they doing with their power? She sat and watched where people ran her country into the ground, and now she has an opportunity to do something about it and do it better? Heck yeah. I do wonder if that early education with her father had instilled in her some sort of dynastic or national, well, not dynastic because she started her own, but national pride or some sort of belief that China needed better.
Yeah. For me, that's a no-brainer, yes.
I also think that she looked at these men who were supposed to be governing.
Well, and supposed to be gods.
And they were instead just fornicating and lounging.
You?
Really? This guy? I could do better. And then, that would make me angry. If I were to be president for the day, if I were to go behind the scenes and find out that all they did was have their chefs make them fancy meals and then sleep with other people, basically if I went to the Kennedy White House.
Yeah, I was about to say just like the Kennedys.
I would be super pissed that this is where the control was and they weren't taking it seriously.
This is how the sausage is made. For a nice Hamilton
Sometimes
reference.
You just don't want to look behind that curtain.
Especially when sausage gets made.
I think she did pretty well with sausage.
Yeah.
She learned how to manipulate that.
Learn how to manipulate that sausage. Is that what you're saying right now?
She had 4 children, so yeah, I think she did. Power hungry. At least pissed off by the...
Power hungry and power retention are 2 different things.
No, I don't agree with the retention. Yeah, she wanted to keep power, but she wanted more and more. She named her own flippin' dynasty.
Well, when you're iconic, Caroline.
She is iconic. And with that, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!